Welcome back to The Explainer. So, you might be wondering, how much time does it actually take to completely terrify an audience? Do you need a 2-hour film? A massive 500-page novel? Well, what if I told you that absolute pure dread can be manufactured in under 60 words? No way, right? Today, we're diving into a fascinating anatomy of a micro-horror story called His Dog Was Taken. We're going to break down exactly how this tiny, bite-sized piece of text builds immense, suffocating suspense using nothing but bare-bones narrative efficiency. We'll look at the exact mechanics of fear, structure, and pacing that the author uses to hook us in literally seconds. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's drop right into the middle of the nightmare here. Listen to this opening line. The leash went tight, he looked up, his dog was gone. Boom. That is the exact moment the false sense of security absolutely shatters. There's no preamble here, right? No long, drawn-out description of the weather or the neighborhood or what the protagonist is thinking about. Instead, the text weaponizes a completely ordinary, tactile sensation, the physical feeling of a dog leash pulling tight in your hand, and then immediately follows it with an impossible disappearance. It forces you, the reader, to experience that exact same jarring whiplash as the protagonist. 1 second, you feel the weight of your pet. The very next second, they're just gone. So breaking this down, let's look at part 1, the deceptive setup. The story opens incredibly simply with a guy just walking his dog around the block. It anchors the whole narrative in this mundane, everyday routine, lulling us into a false sense of complacency right before safety is violently ripped away. To really picture the suddenness of this threat, let's map it out in real time. At time 0, we've got our baseline, right? Just a totally normal walk. Literally 2 seconds later, the leash goes tight. And by the 3rd second, the dog is gone. Normalcy evaporates in the literal blink of an eye. It's an incredibly aggressive pacing choice by the author. They do not give the protagonist, or us for that matter, a single second to logically process this wild shift from a casual stroll to a high-stakes crisis. It all just happens instantly. Moving right along to part 2, the clown appears. Notice how the pacing really accelerates here. There are no commas, no periods, just this relentless, breathless forward momentum. The protagonist's rising panic is mirrored perfectly in the grammatical structure itself. In that initial mystery of the vanished dog, it doesn't even linger because it's instantly replaced by a deeply unsettling visual. We are forced to just sit with the absolute creepiest detail. A clown standing still, holding his dog. Now, the words standing still are doing some massive heavy lifting for the narrative here. The antagonist isn't running away in a panic. He isn't hiding in the bushes. He's standing completely motionless, right out in the open, casually holding the stolen dog. This totally subverts what we'd expect from a standard kidnapping. That total lack of motion, it's a display of absolute dominance, confidence, and just otherworldly unnaturalness. It makes the scene infinitely more terrifying than if the clown had just snatched the leash and sprinted off down the street. So how does our protagonist actually react to this? Well, step 1, he runs toward them yelling. It's a frantic, perfectly natural fight-or-flight response. He's desperately trying to close the distance and assert some kind of physical control over a completely insane situation. But then we slam right into step 2. They vanished behind a tree. And this is the exact moment where the story completely breaks the established laws of physics and plunges straight into supernatural horror. I mean, you cannot have a fully grown person, any dog, simply vanish behind a single tree trunk. By contrasting the protagonist's desperate, grounded human action with the antagonist's impossible, ghostly physics, the text strips away the very last shreds of hope. The protagonist is just completely outmatched here. Now we hit part 3, the unfinished sentence. With the supernatural threat established, the protagonist resorts to the last logical option left to any rational person, which is calling for help. Instead of a rescue, though, we plunge right into the most claustrophobic and chaotic final moments imaginable for such a microscopic word count. Listen to this frantic police call. There was someone here, he took my dog. Even just reading it out loud, you can clearly hear the raw desperation and breathlessness in the protagonist's voice. He's urgently trying to communicate the facts, trying to pull the authorities into his nightmare to help him regain some sort of reality and control. But pay very close attention to the tense being used here. He says, there was someone here. Past tense. In his frantic mind, he actually assumes the threat has successfully vanished behind that tree and is just gone. He assumes, for this brief, fleeting fraction of a second, that he's actually alone and safe enough to dial 911. But here is the crucial point.
This immediate, jarring shift from seeking help to actively being hunted. Because the very next phrase after that phone call is just 3 terrifying words: footsteps behind him. The threat wasn't gone. It hadn't vanished into thin air. It had flanked him. In the mere seconds it took for him to pull out his phone and utter a single frantic sentence to the dispatcher, the predator had completely closed the gap. The tension here spikes astronomically. The hunter is no longer just some creepy visual in the distance. It's right in his blind spot, moving in.
And then a tap on the shoulder. Just think about the absolute paralyzing dread contained in those 5 little words. A tap on the shoulder is fundamentally a gesture of intimacy, right? It requires extreme physical proximity. It requires touch. The author completely eliminates the distance between predator and prey. There's no running anymore. There's no hiding. Think about the physical contrast from the beginning of the story. We started with the mundane, comforting tension of a dog leash pulling in a hand, and we end with the horrifying, invasive touch of a monster on a shoulder. The nightmare hasn't just caught up to him. It's gently, almost playfully, making physical contact to let him know it has unequivocally won.
Which leaves us with a truly haunting question. Why was the sentence never finished? The source material abruptly, violently ends with the words, "He never finished the sentence." We don't get a gory, detailed description of what happens next. We don't get a neat resolution or any closure. We don't even get to hear the confused dispatcher on the other end of the line. The narrative itself is cut off, totally silenced, exactly like the protagonist. It's a masterful use of negative space in storytelling, because by providing absolutely zero answers, the author forces our own imaginations to conjure up the worst possible outcome. What exactly happened after that cold tap on the shoulder? What was waiting for him when he finally turned around? Well, I'm going to leave you to think about that in the dark. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning the details.